Ryan, you were the only one to not pick Bell to the Jets, so I will let you start off on this topic, my friend.
Well, of course, I'm always the outsider looking in, I guess. But it just felt I wanted to be different. It just felt too good to be true, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Lev Bell, I mean, we talked about this in the pre-show. It feels like anywhere that he goes just makes sense, right? Except for, the teams that have the Gurley or Saquon or David Johnson, those types of running backs. But we do have most teams that have the most cap space to spend, a la the Jets, the Colts. I guess the Browns don't count, but the Giants have some space too. The Giants, the Jags, I guess the Jags really. These people that have the cap space to spend could use a running back. And so for me, I'm looking at the situation and looking at what situation not only makes sense from the financial standpoint, but also from a fantasy standpoint and also from a real life football standpoint. And I'm looking at the Colts, and yes, they do have Marlon Mack and Naheem Hines, and they've been admirable for, fantasy purposes. But Le'Veon Bell, I don't know how they can overlook this. And I had written up that he kind of kills two birds with one stone, because they really don't have a receiver outside of T.Y. Hilton. And bringing in Lev Bell kind of helps their running game and their receiving game, both in and of the same. And with that, we have a lot of running backs that are out there that kind of not only that aren't one trick ponies, they do both. But Le'Veon Bell getting there, he instantly makes the Colts an AFC contender. I wrote in there that they're AFC top 3. He had teased prior to this back in November that they had written an article about him joining Andrew Luck in Indy, and he was like, "Oh, could you think about that?" Or it's something like, "What if this happened?" or something like that. So I think he's aware of that too, and I think he wants to go to a situation where he can win. If you go into the Jets, yes, they do have Sam Darnold there, and they were doing some things that look promising, but the Patriots are still there to compete with. The AFC, we always talk about this, the AFC South, how wide open it is every year. It feels like the Houston's down there, but the Titans that they have to compete with aren't really doing too much. So it just made a lot of sense for me to put him there. They have the second most cap space. And then from a real life and fantasy perspective, it would be awesome. It would be awesome to see Andrew Luck throwing it to Le'Veon Bell. It'd be awesome to see him, compete in that division. But the Jets could make sense. A lot of people are talking that way. You three all wrote about it. I just wanted to be different.
Yeah, so Kev, you expressed interest in putting Bell on the Buccaneers down there with Bruce Arians. It would be a really great fit. Unfortunately, the Buccaneers only have $15 million in cap space, so it doesn't – unless they moved around a lot of money, that doesn't really look like a possibility at this point. So you went with the Jets instead. What are your feelings on Bell? As kind of the same as Ryan? There's a ton of places where he can end up.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of different landing spots for him that kind of make sense. After sitting out the whole year with the Steelers, which I don't think really anybody thought was going to happen, but now he finally gets his wish to reach free agency, and he says he wants quarterback money, which I'm gonna let him know right now that ain't happening. Unless some team just is stupid and just completely overpays, but that's just insane to me, especially in the world we live in among running backs, and especially one that's 27 and has the amount of touches that he has on him. I don't know, but I put the Jets because I think the Jets make the most sense financially. They definitely have the need there at running back. So of course the Chiefs would be a great fit for him, but that's just not happening. The Chiefs aren't investing that kind of money in a running back when they just don't need it. So there's plenty of places that would be fun to see him go, but I think the most realistic place is the Jets. I do want to see them upgrade their offensive line. Their offensive line is awful. It was the worst run blocking offensive line in the league last year. So they definitely need to upgrade there. So because his running style is not conducive, and that's what we're going to find out too, right? We've seen it with the Steelers year in and year out. Their running game is always great. James Conner, Jalen Samuels, D'Angelo Williams, they all produce when Le'Veon Bell wasn't there. So, he's been behind one of the best offensive lines in the league for his entire career, and now we're going to see him go somewhere, and if that team doesn't have a good offensive line, I don't know how it's going to work. I think more than anything, if he went to a team like Jets, I don't think he's going to be as efficient that he was with the Steelers, but I think what you'll see is a guy who gets 400 touches touches and still puts up similar numbers, but not more. He will not be as efficient as he used to be, but he will be somebody that I still think you can count on to put up pretty good production. But so that's why I picked the Jets, because I feel like with their cap space that they have a young quarterback in Sam Darnold, kind of making a splash, taking that next step, which makes some sense if they front load the contract, because they're not going to have to pay Sam Darnold for a few years. Kind of take advantage of some of these really smart teams have done. Look at the Bears, the Chiefs, some of these other teams that really get it and really maximize that window with your young quarterback, where you're not paying an ungodly amount to your quarterback. So that's why I think it makes sense. The other spot that I think that made the most sense, if I didn't pick them, would have been probably the Texans. They definitely need a running back, and with Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins, like, that makes a lot of sense. But again, their offensive line is awful, but that's a dark horse candidate. And then like you mentioned, I do think Tampa Bay makes a ton of sense with Bruce Arians. We saw what he did with David Johnson, a perfect fit for what Le'Veon Bell does. But again, do they have the cap space? They could release like a Gerald McCoy and some of these other guys that they have to kind of create the cap space to make it happen. But I think overall, that's why I just went with the Jets, because I think it made the most sense over everything.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he follows the money like he's been clamoring about, or if he actually does take into consideration the offensive line and the supporting cast and things like that. I also like the Jets. Even though as a Dolphins fan, I try to look at it objectively as best as I can, but they have a young quarterback in Sam Darnold. I mean, Robbie Anderson, I believe, is a restricted free agent, but he's shown to be a pretty good receiver up there, and Quincy Enunwa should be fully back from free agency. So if they can add, a piece, another receiver at least, and then, like you said, build up the offensive line, I don't think that would be a terrible situation for him. Almost cut you off there, man.
No, you're good. Yeah, I mean, it's Le'Veon Bell. I guess the only thing is just how you think he reacts to taking a year off of football, and that's why these GMs get paid, and we're just here talking on microphones because we love to talk about scenarios of where these guys can play. But if you're a GM, hopefully they're looking closely. And like Kev says, the 400 touches, how he was getting in Pittsburgh, and that's all good to say because we've seen that happen. But like outside of the Bruce Arians situation, which I do agree with you, Kev, Tampa Bay could be interesting there. But I don't know how many touches he's going to get, especially this day and age where we're seeing all of these situations pretty much turn into running back by committees everywhere. You have to have more than one guy who's out there. And he, outside of the year where he was with D'Angelo Williams, it kind of banged up and dealing with suspension, he was used to being the guy there. I mean, a year with 327 rushes alone, that's crazy. I don't see him like getting that anywhere else, especially with all this talk about what his weight is and having a year off of football. Like, there's so many ancillary things that factor into Bell, not only landing a spot, but then being productive. I would hope he tries to go to a situation where he wouldn't be asked to be that right away. And I think that's kind of what got me off of the Jets is I think they would just pile onto him too much. Whereas like maybe a Houston would be good for him, or a Tampa with Bruce Arians knowing how to use a running back of his caliber, having David Johnson would be good for him because they could ease him back into a situation and not expect too much from him.